Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Today's warehouse needs to keep inventory moving smoothly and quickly. Meet these challenges with on-demand warehouse labeling from Brother Mobile Solutions. Our mobile and industrial printers will help optimize your operations to achieve the speed, reliability, and durability your warehouse needs. With easy integration for existing warehouse technology, convenient portability, and upfront affordability, Brother Mobile Solutions is at your side when it comes to warehouse labeling. Try one for free today by visiting brothermobilesolutions.com/new warehouse or click the link in the show notes. That's brothermobilesolutions.com/new warehouse to try one for free today.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Aaron Alpeter. He is the founder at Izba and also Capable as well, which we're going to talk about both today. But we're going to talk a little bit about his views on the fulfillment side of things, not only from the fulfillment provider perspective, but also the brand perspective as well, and how some relationships have adjusted there since COVID and expectations have changed a little bit. And we're also going to dive into what exactly is Izba and also Capable as well. I think he's a busy man, so we're going to find out all the things he's up to. So, Aaron, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Definitely happy to have you on. I heard, I've been told a couple times that you're a guy I need to get in touch with. So it was great that we were able to connect back at Home Delivery World in June and now get you on the show. So, I mean, I guess tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what is Izba and where did that idea come from?
Sure. So I'm a supply chain guy. I studied supply chain at school. I joined Unilever right out of college and was in a rotational program, and then decided that I wanted to get into startups, and was lucky enough to work with some really well-known startups like Couple Contacts, the Farmer's Dog, Mirror, the Flex Company, et cetera. And kind of throughout this process, just fell in love with startups and supply chain in general, and had this idea, this recognition, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, that startups desperately needed supply chain help. And so basically went out and started out with what was simply a consulting business, but is now morphed into something much more than that. And so, Izba was something that I say was accidentally on purpose created, because today it's actually 3 companies in one. And the whole mission of the combined companies is to help founders start, scale, and exit their businesses. So we've had quite the run helping founders build out lifestyle brands that pay them $1 million a month and they work 4 hours a week. We've got other folks that have sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. And so we've been able to ride along and to be an active participant in each of these. But the 3 aspects of Izba is first, Izba Consulting, which is primarily focused on brands. I think of it as like a fractional COO, a transformational project, typical consulting sort of thing. The second one is a company we acquired called Sourcify, which helps brands lower their COGS. So if you've got a widget that you're making for $10 today, we've got a network of about 3,000 factories from around the world. We can go find that for $850 and then sell it to you for $860. And then the last one is a software company that we built called Capable, which helps brands hold their 3PLs accountable and helps 3PLs really get validation for doing good work from their brands.
Very interesting, and definitely a lot of stuff going on there, but also a very good set of tools and I think a lot of knowledge behind them as well to provide some value to both sides of the table. So, I mean, I'm curious in that sense. You mentioned, kind of a big focus on the startups and really helping them to create that supply chain and build that foundational operation side as well. I mean, how, I guess, talk from the brand perspective. If there's like a brand listening and, they're a startup or somebody's thinking about, coming to market with a new product or something like that. I mean, how important is it to start to build that foundation from the beginning and be able to make sure that it can handle kind of scaling throughout the growth process?
It's table stakes these days. It's incredibly vital. It used to be that all you had to do was to be a good marketer and show a bunch of revenue, and you'd raise a bunch of money and you'd be able to either sell your shares on the secondary or you'd be able to get acquired pretty quickly without showing profit. That's completely changed, especially in 2023 going into 2024. Investors and brands are demanding that you run a sustainable, profitable business basically from day one. And so the expectations that investors have had about what constitutes a seed round investment have really changed. And it used to be the criteria for a Series A is now the criteria for a seed round, or Series B is now a Series A. And so in order to be profitable, you have to be good at supply chain. That's just where it comes down to, because any mistake that you make, any sort of hemorrhaging of money or cash, it's going to come from large part from your supply chain. And so getting your foundational, metrics and philosophies in place from the get-go are really crucial. And, we're also seeing people being okay and welcoming slower growth and saying, hey, you know what, maybe I'm going to start out, I'm going to do self-fulfillment for a little while. And instead of, making a slide that shows how I'm going to be a $100 million brand in 2 years, I'm going to focus on being a $1 million brand this year. And let me do that well, and then know that I still have plenty of the game in front of me.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting to see kind of that change. Like you said, people want to see profit like right away and up front. And I think, it's interesting. I was at a conference a little while ago, and what you're talking about kind of reminds me of something that was said. It said, companies no longer compete, supply chains compete. Right. So, I mean, I think I'm curious, your thoughts on that quote, and, why do you think, as you start a brand, you start to figure out these e-commerce DTC brands, and, how important is kind of figuring out that supply chain to be able to not only, I think, be efficient and profitable, as you mentioned, but then also try and take up market share and be in the market and create that customer experience that's going to help to propel that growth?
That's a great question. I love that quote. I think I might be using that going forward.
It's a good one, right? I've been using it like crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Supply chain is really the intersection between ideas and marketing in the physical world. Mm-hmm. And so most companies sell a physical product. And if that product is late, if it has bad quality, if they just have a terrible experience with an individual on a customer service side, those sorts of things all come back and can be detrimental to a brand. In the creator economy that we have today, people are very quick to join and kind of get on the bandwagon, but also to leave them. And so you can see brands, basically evaporate their goodwill very quickly just based off of, some boneheaded things that they've done. And, I would also say that the other side of this too, where, the perception that you always have to be in stock and that you always have to, be super fast, that's not necessarily the case either. It's about having a supply chain that honors the promises that you're making. So for example, Shein and Temu, their promise is that you're going to get the cheapest thing possible. Yeah. But with Temu, you're going to wait 10 days, 14 dadays, 21 days to get that product because it's coming from China. And that's just part of the contract that people made with that when they went to shop there. Imagine if you had a package that took 21 days from Amazon, you would go livid. You'd be crazy because they've made a different social compact with folks.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I'm hearing that more and more too, where, there was such, large conversation, I think, around speed of delivery. But it seems more apparent that consumers are more, like you said, they just want to know, like, what actually is going to happen, right? They want that transparency. And I think, like you said, it's about the expectation that's set by the brand, right? Is the brand trying to market from the standpoint of fast delivery? Like you said, I've gotten packaged from Amazon and it's taken like 4 days versus 2. And I'm like, what's going on with Amazon? Like Prime's not worth it anymore. But really, that's not too bad. Right. But from that perspective, kind of talk to us a little bit, I think, about where is fulfillment kind of in the discussion in terms of like, what's the current state of fulfillment and what are those kind of current expectations, I guess, maybe from both sides of the table. From the brand perspective and also the fulfillment provider perspective, if a brand is utilizing one.
Yeah. There's a lot there that we can dig into. Let me just go back and touch on the speed thing for a moment, because I think that this was an example of very technical operations people, investors, just seeing what could be done. And we have figured out how to do 15-minute fulfillment, right? That is a solved problem in some cases, but there's nobody who demands that. So that product is going away. And so to some extent, this is just operations folks and investors saying like, well, we could do this. Let's do it because it's cool. It kind of reminds you of like computer programming where they will build this really interesting thing, but it really wasn't the consumer that was asking for it. Yeah. And so, I think the speed piece is a really interesting one because there are circumstances where I need it now and I'm willing to pay whatever it is. If you imagine if I needed medicine, right? Or I had some sort of emergency and I needed it right away. I don't really need my tube of toothpaste in 15 minutes, right? Like I think I can survive a little bit longer, but that's kind of what we tried to build and force into that. And, everybody wants it instantly until you have to pay for it. And that's where you're seeing that kind of shrink back.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point there because, it is like, okay, if I can get it fast, like for free, all right, I'll take it. But then, like you said, like as soon as you have to pay for it, and it adds, because I saw recently, I think the other day, there's some discussion around DoorDash kind of imposing or encouraging the tipping of the dasher, and people were upset because, now like I think there was a message from DoorDash that actually says that your delivery might take longer if you don't include a tip, right? And people were upset, like, oh, why do I have to pay this extra and stuff, right? But it's like you said, you're delivering faster. it is a luxury service, but I think the consumer has gotten so conditioned because of, honestly, because of the Amazon situation, right? And that it's an expectation in some cases that, something will deliver quickly. So it's interesting though, to see where that needle is kind of landing on the expectation. Like you said, we can do 15-minute, but like who's asking for 15-minute, right? So,
yeah. It's kind of funny. Everything good and bad in e-commerce, you can pin on Amazon.
Very true. That's a very good point. So, if we look at that and we look at, the relationship between the brands and the fulfillment providers, and it sounds like now, certainly there's kind of been I think around COVID and the pandemic, there was kind of a boom around 3PLs as well as much as there was a boom around just e-commerce volume and ordering. But it sounds like from what you said earlier that more brands are looking to do some self-fulfillment up front to try and figure out their supply chain before going into a fulfillment partner. Is that the case? And how do you see the relationship between the 3PL and the brand? How has that kind of evolved over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I see. If you imagine a waterfall or a bell curve, right? And self-fulfillment being on either end of the spectrum, what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of very young brands that are first starting out that are really trying to validate if there's a market here. They're willing to do self-fulfillment for longer. It used to be that, hey, I have a bunch of VC money. I'm just going to have a 3PL because I don't have to worry about it. And I'll test in and figure things out. Yeah. And the 3PL will, have to iterate with me. I'm not seeing that as much today. There are a lot of brands that are saying, look, I think I can realistically handle 50 to 100 to 150 packages a day. And I'll hire someone to do that. But it's important for me to get the feedback from the customers, to go through the returns myself, to really understand, is this unboxing thing helpful, to maybe change some of my expectations so it's easier for me to fulfill. And so in some ways, this is quite good for the 3PL industry, because you're going to get more vetted out programs and more vetted out demand as they come into, needing a 3PL. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we're starting to see some bigger brands look at this and say, hey, because of this pressure on profit, and because of this demand that I have to really control, every aspect of that customer experience, I'm going to bring that in-house. And so you start to see it once they have enough volume where they become like a really profitable 3PL customer. You're talking 10, 15, 20,000 shipments a day. Yeah. That's when they're starting to say, hey, you know what? Let me take out 10,000, 15,000 square feet, and I'll take care of this myself, and we'll see where it goes. What you're seeing a lot is that people are doing that self-fulfillment piece as well as leveraging other parties as well.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's interesting. And I think it's interesting that you said too, that, as brands get bigger, they're now looking to go and revert back to self-fulfillment, which is pretty interesting. So, I guess in that sense, from a 3PL perspective, how can a 3PL, because I think sometimes too, you hear a little bit in the market is that, in that startup kind of idea where you said, we'll take it to a 3PL because we got some backing, and then we'll kind of figure out the different iterations of what does our fulfillment look like. And I think sometimes when you have like a lot of those changes and stuff, it can create some friction between the 3PL and the brand. And, I guess what for a 3PL, what kind of advice would you give them maybe to say like, okay, how do we, deal with some changes for a company that's just trying to figure out their growth and experiencing that? And then also on the other side, like, how do we work with these brands when they start to grow to maybe, keep them in-house instead of having them go to self-fulfillment?
Yeah, I think one trend that I would expect to see in the next 2 to 3 years is a lot of these 3PLs offering 2PL solutions. In other words, saying, hey, we've got a long history. We've managed, your brand, your growth of it. Why don't you let us take out a building and operate this for you, so you get the benefits of the control of it, but you don't have to worry about, scheduling people or doing those sorts of things. And so I think that that'll be something that will be more of an active discussion. Because I think that there will be, whether or not they're having this discussion, their big customers are having that internal discussion, and they're looking to say, okay, well, here's, I can find real estate for this amount per square foot. I can find, I think I can hire some people, and how hard could this be? Right. That's the conversation that a lot of folks have. Yeah. And I think that the 3PLs should be active participants in that. And, they should do it. I mean, there's several high-profile startups that actually just went bankrupt in the last couple of weeks because they decided to build their own factories or to pull in a massive distribution center. And so, like, those are the sorts of things that, if done poorly, could really torpedo a brand. And it's something that I think the 3PL should have a bigger seat at the table.
Yeah, I think definitely. And I worked for a company previously, and they had that situation where they worked with the 3PL, and the 3PL had a dedicated building just for them, actually multiple dedicated buildings. But I think that's like a smart way to go. Do you think when you talk to brands, if the brand foundationally has, no operational supply chain type of background, which I think a lot of, e-commerce brands don't traditionally, they're coming more from like a marketing, product development side of things. Do you kind of advise them to, hey, stick to what you're good at, or, maybe you should try this? What's kind of your advice there?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
I think that you can obviously acquire that talent. You can figure that out. Typically, if a brand has gotten to the scale where they are considering self-fulfillment, they have some supply chain people. They have people who have done this before. And so I'm not aware of any mega brands doing significant volume that don't have a team around them. Typically, what you'll find is that these really scrappy young folks that are trying to figure out if they have product market fit or if they have a business there. So think creator economy types of startups. Those are the ones that are more prone to, just have a founder with a finance or marketing background, and they're kind of working through that. And those are a lot of the founders that we help scale with Izba. And so this is something where we do a lot of work with 3PLs where they have a client, they're excited about the prospects of that brand or what they're able to do, but you can kind of tell that they're a dumpster fire, outside of the fulfillment center. And so we get introduced to those sorts of brands all the time. And we do a lot of just free assessments and trying to help them figure out what they should do, what they shouldn't do. And we can come in and act as a neutral third party.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I was curious your thoughts on that. And I think that makes sense. And, I think that's kind of leads perfectly into, the relationship side and what you guys are doing with Capable here, right? Because Capable, as you mentioned, is kind of holding the 3PL accountable, but it's also, I guess, in a way, shining a little bit of a spotlight on the 3PL when they do a good job too. So talk to us a little bit about first, I guess, what is Capable, a little more in depth, and how did that idea kind of come about?
Yeah. So Capable is a neutral third party that helps keep score between a 3PL and their brand. Every contract has some agreement to SLAs, right? There's a cutoff time. There's a certain percentage to say, hey, if we receive orders by 2 p.m., we're going to ship 99% of them on time. Every contract has that. But there's no easy way to keep track of that. And this is something that kind of baffled us when we were just first getting started at Izba is, we would spend all this time negotiating these SLAs and these contracts, but we couldn't agree on the methodology to measure that or how often we measure it. And so one of a few things would happen. Either one, neither side would measure it. And so anytime that there was anything that went wrong, because it's, this is fulfillment, it's people, it's the physical world, things are going to go wrong. What you found is that there were issues that got blown out of perspective. So for example, if I had, 2 orders that were late, the brand may blow up the fulfillment center and say, how could you do this? This is terrible. Yeah. But they don't get credit for the 10,000 orders that they shipped on time. Right. Yeah. So that's the first thing is they don't measure it. The second thing is that the brand will say, hey, you know what? I'll measure this. And so as a 3PL, you're going through and you have to deal with, if you've got 30 clients, you've got 30 different methodologies, 30 different spreadsheets, and you have to spend your time going through and validating that in case their numbers look differently from your numbers. So the third part is like, well, the 3PLs would say, hey, we're going to measure ourselves and we'll prepare a scorecard. Well, most of the brands that I talk to say, well, this is the equivalent of grading your own test. Of course, you're going to weight your own methodology. You're going to show yourself in a better light. And so even if they're doing that, they would still hire folks to come scorecard the scorecard to do that. And so we looked at this and said there has to be a better way. And so what we've built is a very transparent framework, a common methodology to measure what should have happened with what actually happened. And the point here is not to yell at the 3PL and to say that, you're at 85% and that's bad. It's to say we're at 85%. Here are the orders that are driving it. Here are the things that need to be done. And it's to prompt a conversation between the brand and the 3PL to maybe figure out, well, hey, you guys didn't forecast. Maybe we should do that. Or, hey, you're out of inventory and like, what's going on there? And so what we're actually finding is that this is something that is helping 3PLs retain their brands longer because they have a neutral third party every morning sending a scorecard and saying, hey, we're awesome. Like we shipped 100% on time. We shipped 98% on time. We shipped 99% on time. And over time, that consistently just helps build that brand's credibility or that 3PL's credibility with their brand that they are doing a good job.
Very interesting. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And definitely, I think the neutral third party makes so much sense because, there is kind of that back and forth. Like even if the brand is tracking themselves, like then, the 3PL could be tracking themselves and be like, no, we don't have the same numbers. Right. And then who's right. Right. I mean, in that sense. So, I mean, how does that extract the data to be able to create that scorecard? I mean, is this integrating into like the 3PL's WMS? How does that work?
Yeah. So great question. So there's two ways that we integrate. Again, we are between the brand and the 3PL. And so we can help scorecard. The easiest way is for a Shopify brand to download the Capable app in the Shopify App Store. We have a free version available, depending on the bells and whistles or the size of the shipments that you have. But we will take that down. We'll take the information directly from Shopify, and we'll be able to provide a scorecard based on when things are created, when things are shipped, as well as some of the other parameters we put in that. That's option number one. Option number two is to directly integrate with the WMS, with the 3PL. And by doing that, we're able to fully audit every transaction going through that 3PL. And one of the things that we're really excited about is in 2024, we're actually going to be releasing this data from Capable to some of our partners that help with the matchmaking space, right? And so we actually have a website called the Izba Exchange. It's a free website for both brands and 3PLs. It's the largest open database of 3PLs on the internet. Nice. I think we've got about 2,200 that are there. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pumping the performance data from Capable into the exchange. And so if I'm a brand and I'm searching for a 3PL, I can see brands or fulfillment centers that are partially fulfilled, partially audited, meaning they have a couple brands on the Shopify app, or 3PLs that are fully audited, meaning that we've integrated there. And you should let your performance as a 3PL really be what separates you from other folks. And so, in this massive ocean of fulfillment providers who all roughly have the same marketing pitch and the same looking websites, what we want to do is provide empirical data that says, hey, when you're looking at Kevin's fulfillment center, the last 12 months, he shipped at 99% on time for 30 brands out of 50 brands, right? Like that's the sort of data transparency that we want to bring.
I think that's such a great thing. I mean, because if you just go on Google and you're looking for a 3PL, I mean, you don't know, like, really, is this 3PL good or not? It's just that either they have good SEO or, they've paid for the Google ad, right? I mean, so, I mean, it's very good, I think, to have that transparency for the market and be able to see that. So it's a really amazing thing that you're able to do. And I think it just goes to, like you said, I mean, if a 3PL is doing well, like, it's just going to go and help them win more. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because I do think, you mentioned like a lot of the websites looking the same, and you see even some, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It's like even some of the 3PL websites you go on, like they have pictures of the warehouse and it's not even their warehouse, right? It's like stock images. So it's like, having some of that transparency, I think, helps a lot. And I think in the long run, for like the idea and the reputation of the 3PL industry overall, I think that'll help out a lot, because you hear a lot of, brands that have bad experiences and, they're just like, 3PL is like, what's wrong with 3PLs, right? But if you're able to push them towards ones that are performing well, and even push 3PLs to perform better, to be able to have that transparency and be better out there in the market, I think is a really great thing. So a very cool tool, and definitely interested to see how that rolls out next year and what that kind of looks like as well. And you mentioned the Izba exchange. So from a 3PL perspective, can any 3PL just submit their information to be on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's free to do so. It's also free to brands to use. So we're not gatekeeping anything at this point. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're trying to move to a world where there's more transparency in who's good and who needs to be better. And we have some of the most detailed profiles that we've seen. I mean, effectively what we've done is, Izba has a large part of their business, which is helping people find fulfillment centers and to move fulfillment centers. And we've accumulated all of this really rich data in detail about 3PLs and who's doing well, down to what does their ownership structure look like? What type of WMS are they on? What type of industries are they focused on? What do they want to do? What they don't want to do? What are their ICPs? And we've opened that up, and we're making the conscious decision to make that available, because I think that's ultimately where the industry is going. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because there's so many different 3PLs and they do so many different things. I mean, being able to see that, I think from a brand's perspective is such
such a good thing is to be able to go and just kind of narrow down that search and really understand like, hey, who can actually really handle the type of product that I have. I think that makes a ton of sense. So very interesting to talk to you here, Aaron, and learn all about Izba and Capable. As we're recording this now, we're going into the new year. So I'm curious your thoughts before we close out here on what the fulfillment space, e-commerce space looks like as we go into 2024.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be an interesting year. The best fulfillment centers that I've been talking to are basically expecting to be flat in this holiday season and kind of going into next year. A lot of other 3PLs are down. And, there's been this constant tension between specialization and commoditization inside 3PLs. It's like, like we talked about, it used to be having a good website set you apart, and now it's a table stakes. And now they truly have become commoditized because everybody looks at that. And the challenge is that 3PLs need to appear specialized to potential brands, but essentially need to commoditize or standardize the work that they're doing inside of their four walls to be profitable. And what I'm finding is that that's best done when a 3PL is hyper-focused on a specific customer type or a commodity. But obviously in an environment where there's less volume, there's empty space, warehouses are going to make compromises to take on projects slightly outside of their ICPs. And so, the big thing that I would encourage 3PLs to do in 2024 is to actually go through their portfolios and prune brands that don't fit their ICP. That doesn't mean that they have to kick them out right away, but they should really understand what is it that they want to be. And they need to look at these brands and understand, do they fit our philosophy for what we want to do? And do we feel confident in these brands' fundamental economics? Are they going to be around in 2, 3, 4, or 5 years? And if you can go through and identify brands that fit your criteria for what you want to be, and ones that have good backing and good foundational economics, then you should do everything you can to service those brands. You should give them the highest level of customer service. You should collaboratively talk with them. You should talk about their expectations. You should come to them with cost savings ideas. You should do everything you can to really make sure that you are treating your most important clients the most importantly, instead of treating everybody the same. And I think that 2024 is one that if you do that, you can plan on growing conservatively, and you should really be focusing on letting your performance be what makes you special versus the website or any other tech that you're using.
Absolutely. And you can show off that performance by using Capable, right? So very interesting stuff, and definitely great insights going in there. And I think that makes a ton of sense as you say, you're looking at kind of flatline growth and being able to take a step back and really look at your portfolio and that perspective, I think makes a lot of sense, and focus in on what you're good at and make sure that what you have in your building or your buildings is matching what you're good at, right? So really interesting and insightful stuff from you, Aaron, and very happy to have got you on the show here. And hopefully we'll be having some future conversations as well. But if people want to get in touch with you, they want to learn more about Izba or Capable or Sourcify, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put the links to those directly at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find them. So Aaron, thank you very much for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.